A responsive reading from the book of Proverbs. Honor the Lord with your substance and with the first fruits of all your produce.
Your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine.
Some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due and only suffer want.
A generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water.
The people curse those who hold back grain, but a blessing is on the head of those who sell it.
Those who trust in their riches will wither, but the righteous will flourish like green leaves.
This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Our gospel reading today comes from Matthew chapter 6. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I had a visit this week from a development officer from the athletic department of my alma mater, the University of Miami. Louise was just getting started in this work, and she did a nice job in her time with me. I was on her radar because of my regular giving, not because of the amount given. I let her know that giving to Wilshire was my priority, but I also have a policy of giving something to all the institutions and organizations that have helped to shape me into who I am as a person, and so she came. At that point, then, she showed me a record of my giving history. She asked me if I was willing to make a pledge to continue giving, whether I would be willing to increase my giving somewhat, and whether I would be willing to do it before the end of May. Yes, yes, and yes. Before she left, she asked my advice about how to ask people to give. Since she knows that I'm a pastor and this is what I do, and also because she knew what many of you probably don't know, and that is I worked for a year after college in alumni relations at the University of Miami doing the same. So I was somewhat practiced in this. And here's the biggest takeaway that I left her with that comes mainly from my experience with you. You ready? People want to give, and they are grateful to be asked. Really. We all know intuitively that when we give, this is the way we are made, and it's the way God has made the world. And that when we give, we are part of a current of reciprocity that flows in and through all things. Always ask people to give, I told her, because it's good for the cause they give to, and it's good for them to give. Lucky for you, I'm taking my own advice today. I'm asking you to give. I'm calling on you to give generously and immediately for the cause of the work of God in the world, the best possible cause. For the sake of the church you love that is doing God's work in the world, the best possible means. and for the sake of God's work in you, the best possible benefit. Now, we've had a lot on our plate as a church for a while. Did you know? So I apologize for not asking you to do this more often and recently. I'm trying to make up for it now. But now is the time to pass the plate and fill it up generously with our gifts. The world is waiting. I know that sounds grandiose. The world is waiting, right? And it may seem a bit abstract. If I had video screens in this sanctuary, don't worry. I could show you picture after picture of suffering people waiting to know the love and consolation of God through the witness of a generous church. I could show you the faces of starving children and bloody images of war-torn places. We are, though, I think, because of communication nowadays, virtually immune to these things because we see them every day. And emotional appeals like that, they work now and then, but they don't produce systemic change in the world or in us. The more important thing to remember is that every time you give, you are simultaneously making an offering of yourself to God and to the world. You are joining Christ in bringing rescue and healing and salvation to a world that desperately needs it. It's easy to lose the connection between our giving and God's saving work in the world. If I could magically transport you to Macedonia this morning, I could show you a hospitality house where our missionaries are at work welcoming and helping to settle refugees from the Middle East and North Africa. And you would say, how can I help? You would have a hard time not pulling your wallet out. If I could transport you magically to the city of Aleppo in Syria, if there is such a thing as the city of Aleppo anymore, as much as it has been destroyed by war. I could show you the work of the Preemptive Love Coalition with Christians and Muslims alike who have been devastated and have lost everything but their soul. And you would say, how can I give? And right now. If I could have magically transported you yesterday with Kim and me to the Studio Movie Grill here in Dallas, where we saw a powerful and painful film titled 8 Days, which is about human trafficking and sexual exploitation of young girls that happens all over the globe every day, including in our own city of Dallas, and about the efforts to eradicate that in our time, you would say, how much do we need and where can I give? But here's the thing. That's exactly what happens when you give here, whether you are seeing the world's pain in person or not, because we've done the vetting for you. We want to make sure your gifts get to places where God is changing our city and our state and our world. You may think when you give to the church, you are giving to the church. And you are, but you are also giving through the church. If it all stops here, we aren't doing our job of repairing the world, as the Jews like to put it. A good portion of what you give does stay close to home to feed this community of faith. Those gifts include feeding the life of the staff, from pastors to custodians. It matters deeply to their families that you give. It also includes giving to the pastoral residency program in our church that is changing the face of leadership in churches across this country. And it all starts right here on Abrams Road. It includes shaping the lives of children and youth in ways of God that will stay with them forever as they walk the way of Christ, and it includes not only blessing your hearts week by week here in this place, but breaking your hearts just a little so that you never get complacent, so that you never are allowed to live in a bubble of privilege and lose out on what it means to join God in God's work in the world. I don't know about you, but this church's work has shaped my life and my family's life in ways I can never repay. There's an African proverb called Ubuntu that says, I am because we are. And we are. And I am because we are, and because we are, you are. Can any of you who've been here for a while imagine what you would be if it weren't for your life in this church? Is that not worthy of your financial giving? Do you want the church to flourish or flounder? Much of that depends on your commitment to it and through it. Consider what this church would be if every person's giving reflected yours. If you think that's a good thing because you're already exceedingly generous, thank you. Keep leading and experiencing the blessing of God, because the scripture says, and we just read, a generous person will be enriched, and in every way. But for the rest of us who know we have room to grow in our giving, I'm challenging you today to draw upon your deepest desire to honor God with your giving. Let's all step up in stewardship beginning right now and make the month of May a challenge. Let's make it a launching pad for our future together. It's time for takeoff. First, step up by starting up. If you're not giving anything right now, step up by starting to give something. You can't cross the finish line if you don't first cross the starting line. Right? No guilt here, just encouragement. I know, and in your heart you know how this works. Once you stop, it'll be hard to start. It'll be hard to stop, right? Okay. Make a new habit this month. Maybe set up an automatic bank withdrawal so that you'll be disciplined about that and stay committed. Now, some of you have wanted to be tithers for a long time, and you haven't gotten there yet. You know the biblical benchmark for giving is 10% of your gross income. If you are at 2% now, why not try to move to 5% in May as an act of faith in God's promises to you? And if you are really ready to prove God's faithfulness, why not try to tithe for the month of May and see what happens? Honor the Lord with your substance and with the first fruits of your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. And that last part about vats bursting with wine even goes for teetotaling Baptists, don't you know? Now, some of you are giving regularly, and yet you are behind in your intentions. Maybe you had unexpected expenses, or you simply stopped paying attention. Maybe you've been uncertain about the church because of our challenges this last year or so. It's time to renew our commitment, friends, and move forward. I urge you to step up by catching up. Take the May challenge and catch up this month. On the other hand, some of you are downright excited about the future of this church now. You feel like we've removed all the ifs and buts from our vocabulary of love. Love is love is love is love. But love is more than words. It's deeds too, and giving is indeed a deed. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, thank you, Rob, for sending this to me, There's no more liberating, no more exhilarating experience than to determine one's position, state it bravely, and then act boldly. Giving generously to back up your bravely stated position is acting boldly. But here's the thing, acting boldly by giving generously might also give you more heart, give you more courage to be brave. Jesus doesn't say, where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. What he says is, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So then step up by starting up or catching up. But here's the last thing for some of you, doubling up. What if you could give twice this month what you usually give, or more? Some of you can do that, even if you don't have the income you used to have. Now, some of you have done, let's be honest, a great job of laying up for yourselves treasures on earth. Where moth and rust consume, and where thieves may break into your 401k plan and steal. I'm in that category too. I've had good financial advisors all my life long who have taught me to prepare for retirement down the road. Okay. I believe in that, and I want you to prepare well as well. But the older I get, and the farther down the road I get, the more I look at all that, and I start worrying over whether there's going to be enough. Anyone else? Right? But listen to the word I just used, worry. The more I focus on my savings, the less I am inclined to give because I am worried about not having enough. We make savings goals and we make spending goals. How many of us make giving goals? So here's my question to myself and maybe to you. Why would any of us live the first 2/3 of our lives giving generously and learning to trust the Lord with our giving, and then suddenly shift to a posture of worrying and withholding? Should we not trust God with our accumulated wealth as well as our steady income? With the things that we have saved as well as the things we are earning? Now, we were talking about this whole thing at deacons meeting the other night, and our chair, Charles Yarborough, was telling about a time when, as a young married couple, he and Judy were praying about and committing themselves to be part of a capital campaign at Wilshire. So they had arrived at a number, and they put it on the card, and they went to Sunday school, big mistake that day because it was a stewardship lesson. And they sat there and listened to it, and then they, went their separate ways, and as they did, they got more and more burdened about it, and they ran to find each other in the hallway, and each of them looked at the other and said, "We've got to do more." The Sunday school lesson basically asked them whether they had trusted God enough to put God to the test, to see if they could give more than they thought they could. And so they did. It changed them for good, and they've never looked back. So I sat there at deacons meeting listening to this, and it convicted me. See, it goes both ways. Sometimes you preach to me. Really. See, I had dutifully planned to double my monthly giving in May. But then I'm sitting there and I thought, well, maybe I could treat it as a capital campaign like Charles was talking about and give half of our annual gifts again to the budget as a way to really make a significant difference. And I went home to tell Kim, fearing what she might say. She listened to me, and then she reminded me that we'd recently been able to add to our savings because of some inheritance money, and that this time, if there was ever a time we should do something bigger for the church. And then she looked at me and she asked me this question: how is half double? So there you go, marriage. We're going to give a double tithe this year and trust the Lord for the future. I don't know what you're supposed to do, but I suspect it's more than you think you can do. But how will you know? Unless you step up in stewardship and see. Amen.